MacDac writes in and asks, why has Metroid never taken off as a big-time franchise? It has a legacy. It's a cool space game about a bounty hunter. Seems like it should be one of Nintendo's top franchises, yet its sales and overall popularity say different. What gives?
Well, I think part of it is they refused to make another one for like 30 years.
So we'll just never know. It's just, Schrodinger's cat. Maybe it could be the best franchise. We'll never test it.
Yeah. I think it was hard. I think, it came out late in the cycle for Super Nintendo, which I think is why it didn't sell great. And I think they took some lessons from that they shouldn't have. And then you got into the weird era where it's like, okay, well, now we're doing 3D games. And so where does this 2D series fit in there? And I think it just took them a long time to figure it out. And it's probably more expensive for them to make than some of their other games, or they just don't have that formula, like a clear-cut formula down for it that they can keep going back to. I think it's,
and I think it's also the problem, although you never call Metroid Prime a problem, but with that shift to first person with Metroid Prime, which worked out so well, they had to staff up Retro to create that type of game. And then when it's like, okay, Retro's going to go off, do other things, they don't exactly have a powerhouse first-person shooter team ready to take that over. They need that skill set in-house. And so they're kind of just left in the wind. And then, they made the remake of Metroid 2, which some people loved. I understand people are frustrated it's on the 3DS, but there you go, Jeff. If you really want a new Metroid game, just go play that.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't accept their offer.
I also wonder if it's just a thematic thing where, maybe a lot of the concepts behind Metroid, where it's pretty lo-fi compared to a lot of other sci-fi, maybe just didn't click with like a Japanese audience. So maybe Nintendo specifically doesn't have like that kind of innate love for that franchise that would inspire a lot of like, oh, let's do Metroid, but with this, right? And then, it ended up being that like the one that felt most, attuned to Japanese taste, which was Metroid Other M, was the one that everyone just kind of is like, no, this is not what we want from Metroid. So I think that ended up solidifying as like, this is more of a Western franchise. And so there's always like this remove for Nintendo maybe of like, it's not innately our thing because, it's a retro thing at this point. And so maybe they're not as committed to it as they are like Mario and Zelda, which consistently sell well. And, Nintendo understands what makes those games appealing, whereas maybe they don't have as good of a grasp on that with Metroid.
It could be. Yeah. And I do know, I heard from a very, very good source that would know this type of thing, that Miyamoto has never liked or understood Metroid. Not that he is full creative force of Nintendo and he's not the marketing budget and greenlighting every project, but I heard that he was just like, it's just not for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, someone told me at one point that he was the one who posted on the Wii U message board and asked, how does Metroid crawl?
He did, actually. Yeah, that's a great point. A very reliable source also said that. I understand what MacDac is getting at here. Like, it has all those ingredients, but just it does not mesh with Nintendo. If Microsoft owned Metroid, they would be beating that into the ground, and those games probably would be successful at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
If they you could almost see it as like if Samus wasn't a character in Smash Brothers, I think Nintendo would have just said, yeah, you can have that and Banjo, I guess.
I think it's a rare property. Just take it. But yeah, you're looking at the sales. Series sales for Metroid is at 18.23 million. So that's in the same arena as, it's below Wario and barely above, basically tied with Luigi's Mansion.
Below Wario. It's well below Nintendogs, well below Duck Hunt, if you want to factor that in. You look at it and it's like, okay, about 1/5, less than 1/5 the sales of Legend of Zelda. And then if you look at it just as a terrible corporate robot, it's like, that makes sense. It seems like Nintendo is pushing Metroid about 1/5 as they push Zelda as a franchise. So maybe everything checks out if you look at the sales numbers. I think those things also go along with their not really understanding it to begin with, where it's like, well, we don't get this franchise. We don't really want to do it. We keep hearing that people want it, but then when we do it, it doesn't sell well. And also just like the fractured, fan base of like, okay, well, we made these 3D ones and a bunch of people were like, no, we want a 2D one. And then we made the 2D one and people are like, no, I just want, the sprite version of that,
For people who are operating on a completely different level in terms of like the business and what kind of games they want to make and stuff, I can see how that would be very confusing for them, and you just wouldn't want to touch it unless it's selling gangbusters.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about like the last 5 Metroid games have all been from external studios like Retro, and then Team Ninja, and then I forget the name of the 3DS developer, but it was Mercury Steam.
Yes.
So it just feels like Nintendo doesn't really have an innate desire to do anything with Metroid. It's more like, well, if someone else has a good idea, like we'll run it by our internal testing. So like that point, be that bar for like, oh yeah, we'll make a new Metroid. It seems a lot higher because there isn't that internal like, yeah, we'll make a new Mario game and this is the hook, right? Whereas like Nintendo doesn't know what to do with Metroid, and they're kind of just waiting for someone else to pitch them on something cool.
God, I would hope that Cadence of Hyrule opened up that door a little bit. Like I hope that within the next 5 years, the most satisfying Metroid experience. And I'm looking forward to Metroid Prime 4, but I'm a little skeptical too. I just wonder if it's going to be an indie team somehow working its way through that labyrinth that Cadence of Hyrule did and just creating some 2D offshoot like that.
I mean, like they could have Mercury Steam make a new DS game or a Switch game, I guess. Maybe they can offload it to like Team Cherry or someone. It's like someone they're kind of like known for. Hey, we have a pretty good relationship with Nintendo, and we're known for making this kind of game.
Yeah, and it's not fair to be like, oh, Nintendo doesn't get Metroid. Like they made it. I mean, Sakamoto is still over there. He was, working on every new Metroid product as a producer. Even he was behind that 3DS game, the Federation Force and stuff. Like he clearly understands Metroid. It's just doesn't seem like there's a lot of people in the office that are like him.
What do the crazy fans want from Metroid?
Yeah, and it's like, even if he had a really good idea, I think it would be a little difficult for him to feel like, hey, I really like this idea. It's like, yeah, it's going to sell 1/5 as well as any Zelda game that we just randomly cook up. Like, well, obviously those games take a lot of effort to make, but like, it's a lot harder for just one person to have that kind of exciting idea that pushes a whole team to make a multi-million-dollar project.
Right.
It's just what makes it frustrating is just the releasing the latest Metroid on 3DS thing. It's like if Sony was like, ladies and gentlemen, Siphon Filter is back, out now this holiday on PlayStation 3. And it's like equally likely that it may as well have not come out, And it's frustrating to like just put it on Switch and see how it does there before you write off the series. Nintendo executives, please.
Yeah, well, Metroid Prime 4, it's happening, just not the 2D stuff. But I hear you, it feels a little bit like Ubisoft, what they're doing with the Prince of Persia remake, though, where it's like, only last gen. I understand you can still play it, but it still feels a little bit of that like, here, shut up, fans, here's a slightly outdated thing. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The deepest dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.